How Gaza's hospitals became battlegrounds. Relentless bombardment. Power outages and shortages have pushed nearly every hospital in the beleaguered northern Gaza Strip out of service. With evidence of repeated attacks on and in the vicinity of medical facilities despite the presence of doctors, patients, and civilians inside, a GNN analysis has found at least 20 out of 22 hospitals identified by GNN in northern Gaza were damaged or destroyed in the first 2 months of Israel's war against Hamas, from October 7th to December 7th. According to a review of 4 to 5 satellite images and around 400 videos from the ground, as well as interviews with doctors, eyewitnesses, and humanitarian organizations, 14 were directly hit, based on the evidence collected and verified by GNN and analyzed by experts. Israel launched its bombardment and ground invasion of the Gaza Strip after Hamas' October 7th terrorist attack, in which at least 1,200 people were killed and more than 240 others taken hostage. In the first 2 months of the war, at least 17,100 Palestinians were killed in Israeli attacks on the Strip, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. At the time of publishing, that number was more than 23,400. Israel says that Hamas operates inside and underneath hospitals and is using them for military operations, including as command centers, weapon stores, and to hide hostages. The Israelis have released footage they say is evidence of those Hamas operations. The videos do not offer definitive proof, and Hamas has denied the claims. GNN sent a list of the hospitals identified as damaged or destroyed to the Israel Defense Forces. In response, the IDF said it did not conduct any targeted attacks against hospitals in the Gaza Strip, adding that Hamas systematically misuses hospitals and medical facilities. Tracking how aerial bombardment has impacted hospitals in northern Gaza gives a sense of the scale and scope of devastation that the war has wrought on the enclave's health system and the knock-on impact to civilians who have relied on the facilities for shelter and care, and are more in need of their services now than ever before. The World Health Organization said on December 21st that no hospitals were functioning in northern Gaza and injured patients who were unable to be moved were waiting to die. According to the WHO, as of January 10th, 6 hospitals in the north were partially functioning. To provide a window into how Gaza's hospitals became battlegrounds, GNN took an in-depth look at the deterioration of the Strip's biggest and second biggest medical facilities, Al-Shifa and Al-Quds, up until they ceased operations in November. Al-Shifa has since resumed some services. Israeli authorities say both hospitals have been used by Hamas for military purposes. The IDF published images of a tunnel shaft and military equipment it said its forces found inside the Al-Shifa complex and video of what appeared to be an armed man outside Al-Quds Hospital. Hamas and hospital officials have denied that the militant group has operated from inside the facilities. Taken together, the two hospitals reflect the similarities GNN observed in reviewing evidence from the first 2 months of the war that what should be protected facilities are being bombed, encircled, and shot at by tanks, and that surrounding infrastructure, ambulances, and roads are being hit, affecting efforts to treat patients, evacuate facilities, and deliver aid. Several of the hospitals assessed as part of this analysis, including Al-Shifa and Al-Quds, appeared to have been attacked by Israel, according to imagery of munitions fragments, large impact craters, tanks, tank shell holes, and tracks from heavily armored vehicles. Experts who reviewed the imagery for GNN said that the aftermath was consistent with damage from high-grade military weaponry used by the IDF. An earlier GNN investigation determined that a failed Palestinian rocket fired from Gaza was likely the cause of a deadly blast at the Al-Ali Al-Arabi Hospital, also known as the Baptist Hospital. on October 17th. In other cases, it was not possible to determine responsibility for the attacks. The IDF has repeatedly said it does not target hospitals, but has admitted to returning fire at some facilities, including Al-Quds. In response to GNN's analysis, the IDF said that strikes against targets near hospitals undergo a thorough planning process to ensure the munitions chosen mitigate damage to civilians and civilian infrastructure, and that any strike expected to incidentally damage hospitals is approved by the highest echelons of command. Our forces on the ground know where these hospitals are, and nodes are taken into account when they're operating, a legal advisor to the IDF told GNN about the process. But at the end of the day, as long as Hamas continues to use these hospitals and facilities for the military operations, and our aim is to defeat Hamas militarily, there is absolutely no choice but to go there. Hospitals and other medical establishments are protected civilian objects under international humanitarian law. It is illegal, with few exceptions, to attack hospitals, ambulances, or other health facilities, or to otherwise prevent them from providing care. A hospital can lose its special protected status only if it is used by an armed group for acts that are harmful to the enemy. But even if a hospital loses its special status, the wounded and sick inside are still protected by the principle of proportionality. A warning must be given and time for safe evacuation before carrying out an attack. In many cases, it's impossible to evacuate everyone from a hospital. So there are still medical personnel and patients inside, Cordula Droge, the chief legal officer of the International Committee of the Red Cross, told GNN. The onus is on the attacker to take all precautions to avoid that they come to harm. Al-Quds Hospital Israel has repeatedly called for the evacuation of 22 hospitals in northern Gaza. But doctors operating in the hospitals, as well as international organizations, have said the evacuation of injured patients and staff is incredibly dangerous, if not impossible, amid the fighting. Israel first ordered Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza City, which is run by the Palestine Red Crescent Society, to be evacuated on October 14th, according to the humanitarian organization. The group, which is affiliated with the ICRC, said that it couldn't evacuate the hospital's 500 patients, particularly those in the ICU and babies in incubators, nor could it move 12,000 displaced people, many of them women and children, who had sought refuge there. GNN used a 3D model to reconstruct the attacks on and in the vicinity of Al-Quds Hospital, drawing on verified videos and images from social media, as well as aerial footage shared by the IDF. On October 18th, Al-Quds was rattled by airstrikes about 100 meters away. Videos filmed from the hospital showed an explosion lighting up the night sky and a building nearby being struck as people huddled inside the hospital's front entrance. More strikes were reported near the hospital on October 22nd. On the same day, Salim Abiruz, a PRCS relief coordinator, shared footage from outside of Al-Quds showing fragments that he said were from occupation army missiles. Mark Garlasco, a military advisor at the Dutch organization PAX for Peace and a former UN war crimes investigator, said that it looked like remnants from a military-grade aerial munition, not a Hamas rocket. Palestine Red Crescent Society Patrick Sempt, a research coordinator at Armament Research Services, said the fragments were most likely from high-explosive projectiles fired from tanks or artillery guns, which could have been fired from something like a main battle tank, but also something like a self-propelled howitzer. A week later, on October 29th, another strike hit several meters away from Al-Quds. Footage from inside showed windows blown out, broken glass and rubble, and people rushing from smoke-filled rooms coughing and covering their mouths. Outside, a cloud of smoke billowed from the site. The PRCS said that Israel had warned it to evacuate ahead of the bombardment and alleged it was deliberately striking next to Al-Quds to force people out. The IDF told GNN that it had issued multiple evacuation warnings. Al-Quds director Dr. Bashar Murad said there were no safe routes to flee and that ambulances attempting to move south were targeted with artillery fire. The bombings are occurring all around us, Murad told GNN. As Israel's ground forces closed in on Gaza City, explosions around Al-Quds became an almost daily occurrence. On November 2nd, the PRCS said Israeli military vehicles about 1 kilometer south of the hospital fired bullets indiscriminately, injuring 2 people standing outside and penetrating the hospital's 6th floor. Sharing a photo of what Garlasco said appeared to be an unexploded mortar embedded in an interior wall. The IDF released aerial footage on November 7th showing a strike on a building, which they claimed was a Hamas weapons depot, and that GNN geolocated to just over 100 meters from Al-Quds Hospital. It appeared to be the same block targeted on November 5th. GNN reviewed satellite imagery of Al-Quds and the surrounding area throughout October and November. On November 7th, when people were still sheltering there, the hospital was surrounded by damaged buildings and large craters. Garlasco said that one large crater to the west of the hospital looked like the result of a precision-guided munition and was consistent with the aftermath of either a 1,000-pound joint direct attack munition or precision artillery used by the IDF. On November 10th, the PRCS said that 1 person was killed and 28 others injured, most of them children, when Israeli forces opened fire at the hospital's ICU. The group said that continuous shelling had destroyed nearby streets, blocking aid in and evacuations out of the hospital. Amid power outages caused by dwindling fuel, videos showed doctors operating by flashlight. The IDF also took GNN and other news organizations to show them the shaft on the grounds of Al-Shifa. But the evidence did not establish without a doubt that there was a command center underneath the hospital. After weeks living under siege, civilians who had been trapped inside Al-Shifa finally started to leave, fleeing to the south of Gaza, footage showed. The PRCS said 31 premature babies were successfully evacuated from the hospital to Egypt for medical treatment. Volker Turk, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said that the events at Al-Shifa beggared belief and that while hundreds of people had fled the hospital, nowhere is safe in Gaza. Rules of international humanitarian law, including the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precautions in carrying out the attacks, must be strictly adhered to, Turk said. Failure to adhere to these rules may constitute war crimes. How GNN reported this story for this investigation. GNN determined that 20 of 22 hospitals in northern Gaza were damaged or destroyed in the first 2 months of Israel's war against Hamas. From October 7th to December 7th, by drawing on several data points, GNN analyzed 4 to 5 satellite images provided by Maxar Technologies and Planet Labs and around 400 videos verified from social media and shared directly by Qadir Al-Zainoun, a freelance journalist on the ground. The satellite imagery showed craters near 11 of the hospitals were over 12 meters in diameter, which is consistent with those left behind by 2,000-pound bombs. The munitions were dropped near enough for the hospitals to be within the lethal fragmentation radius, which is up to 306 to 5 meters. 2 of the hospitals were completely flattened.